Welcome back to Clarity with David Prosper, the podcast where we trade confusion for clarity and help you live by design and not default. Today, I'm joined by Aïko Thurlow, the founder of InFounders, an organization dedicated to building masterminds and communities for entrepreneurs. Aiko's mission is simple but powerful. No founder should go at it alone. Through her work, she helps leaders and visionaries find clarity, connection, and courage in their journeys. Aiko, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, David. It is so nice to be here with you. I appreciate it.
Uh, Awesome. The honor is mine. I am curious. So you founded and founders for supporting entrepreneurs. What problem were you trying to solve?
My own problem. If I can be honest, maybe like a lot of founders that were out there, I had gone through the startup journey myself. And as you may know, as many of you may know, it's an incredibly lonely journey. It's hard. You need to kind of figure out something completely new all by yourself. But the other part is that it's very lonely. You need to put yourself out there, represent this brand that, minutes prior did not exist. And honestly, you need to sell yourself. And so, this whole process was, tedious, stretching, but also just felt like it would have been better in company. Unfortunately, what I found were networking opportunities, but as you might know, also conversation tend to stay on surface level. People are there a little bit in the format of I pitch you, you pitch me, and a lot of the time it's more of a selling and a transactional thing than deeper human relationship. So when I had the opportunity to experience a mastermind myself, it was life changing. It was just such a beautiful thing to be in a space where we just kind of authentically showed up, left, the Superman suit out of the door and just talked about what was really going on in our lives. And honestly, the good and the hard. And to have people having your back in that process. So that's what a mastermind allowed me to get. And I was so enthralled by this whole process, just seeing how much better it felt in a community, how much clearer we got with people, how much more powerful, we were able to be. And honestly, each one of us achieved things in the time that we were in this mastermind that no one else had achieved, that I just became so curious about this process. And I just thought, what is the secret sauce? Is it this group? Is it me? Is it, what is it that kind of created this magic? Is it the process? Eventually I figured out that masterminds had been around for a very long time. And not only this, but they were around for a lot of people, but kind of very select stratas of society. And I just thought, let's just kind of bring that support to everyone, right? So this is why I created InFounders. It was to say, you don't need to be a president of a Fortune 500 to be part of one of these select groups. Everyone should have access to peer community, to discussions, to getting out of our head, to group accountability. It just makes for such a better world. So that's how it all started.
Mm, that's beautiful. Like it started from your need and your need for community, and then creating a space where it's inclusive and it allows other people to fellowship and to show up authentically versus the transactional, as you said, a networking event. I'm curious, like, what have you noticed when people show up authentically?
When they show up authentically, it feels good in so many
Yeah.
ways. Because there's kind of this thing with human where a lot of the time we feel like we need to mirror, right? So, and that's definitely a path to acceptance that a lot of us have learned. But so if people show up and say, "Oh, I'm doing great, and this is coming up, and I'm crushing it with this, and I'm so excited for this big opportunity that's down the line," you will also want to talk about all the great things that are going on in your life. But really, it actually makes people feel more alone than anything. So, a lot of the time, people organize communities or networking opportunities to bring people together. But really, people end up leaving these places kind of a little bit empty because although they were meant to come and connect, that's not necessarily what happened. When you're able to, on the other end of the spectrum, have people show up authentically, this is where the gold is, right? This is when we start talking about. So just before this, let me just do kind of a small tangent. I a lot of the time think of an onion analogy for people, where on the outside of the onion is kind of where the information that we're willing to share with everyone lives. And the more we go within the layers of the onions, the more that information becomes private and personal. And so a lot of the time, inauthentic is the outside of the onion layers. It's where are you from? What do you do? What brought you here? But the more we go inside, the more we're moving towards tell me a little bit more about your hobbies, your family. And a few layers further in is going to be what are your values? And maybe within this again is going to be what's the story behind it that made you believe this? And deep within is going to be our identity of who we think we are, and also maybe some of our fears, some of the things that keep us up at night. So being authentic, meaning to kind of like create a space where people have the permission to trust to go a little bit deeper within that onion. And as you can imagine, just people lean into one another so beautifully. And it just creates very different relationship. Combining this with productivity, which is also what happens in a mastermind, making sure that there's relational depth, but there's also substance. Like people walk away with tangible, helpful chunks of might it be knowledge or strategies to help them, so on and so forth. Combining these two makes for such a potent mix and for incredible interactions.
Yeah. You said something interesting. You said when people often leave these networking spaces
Yeah.
because we mirror if someone's doing well, we want to show up as I'm doing well, but we leave more empty than before. And it's interesting because I've I've often said and I've often wondered like we are socially connected, but we are emotionally disconnected. So
Mm.
you're finding that when the onion layer that you mentioned, the what do you do, where are you from, the
Yeah.
closer we get towards the middles, the closer we become with the closer we get to be more connected to individuals. I'm curious, what's the biggest mistake founders make when trying to go at it alone?
There's a number of things. The biggest one that I see, kind of maybe like the origin one that I see, is putting something out there based on supply and not based out of demand. So this is maybe more into the technicality of the startup world, but a lot of the time, because we love something, we imagine that there's demand out there, and we will convince ourselves that there is. At times, that's not really true, but to me, that's a blind spot, right? As a founder alone, it's really hard to see this, to have that clarity. As a group, if the group is loving and trusting and all of these things, people will start pointing out your blind spots. It might be around, is there really demand for what you're putting out there if you're an early stage startup? If you're a later stage startup, it might be around, hey, do you think that you might be the bottleneck of your operations? Because a lot of the time, as we scale, this is a lot of the time what happens for founders. I tend to kind of think of a pyramid, and sometimes the best of founders will create a pyramid where they keep on hiring people and the pyramid elevates them and they're able to keep on having the vision and the strength to push ahead. Founders who have a hard time scaling will, on the opposite, maybe build an upside down pyramid where they're at the bottom. And the larger their organization gets, the more they feel crushed underneath. And so we need to make sure, and this is true, by the way, not just in entrepreneurship, it's true of any team, being able to delegate and to be able to give people the agency and the authority and the trust to help scale what you're doing. This might be one of the things where founders at the very that are kind of new and still in the trenches are going to be struggling with. So I think it's just so healthy to have that external perspective, because this is it. Like, I think there's nothing like entrepreneurship to be stuck in our own echo chamber. We need to create everything, put out all the fires, and it's very much kind of stretching ourselves in new ways. But at time, because we don't have the bandwidth and because we are so absorbed in the operations, it is so good to just have someone else on the side that doesn't have the emotional weight, that doesn't have the same stress as us, that's able to give a really fresh perspective and say, hey, seems like there's this thing in your blind spot in your peripheral. Have you noticed? Have you thought about that? Right. And this is when there are big aha moments, big realization moments of, I can't believe that, let's say my 80/20 has been this, or that I had been the bottleneck, or whatever that is. It's amazing. And then not only that, people end up having a peer group that can help them kind of change the situation that they're in. So it's not just that the group helps you realize, it's also that then you also have the company to create that transformation and people are rooting for you to be doing better, right? So why not? Why not take advantage of that?
Hmm. I like that. And I'm just curious, like being the founder of InFounders, do you participate in it as a founder, or do
Mm.
you have a separate group? Like that just as you were talking, I was like, is she active in her own group? And how does that look like?
Yes. So I have to say, one thing that I'm trying to do, even though we've scaled to many groups, is that as much as possible, I still try to facilitate some groups because I think that there's nothing like being close to the people that we're serving. So for me, even kind of running my own business, it could be easy to just, have facilitators do all the work, but I still try to facilitate within. When I'm facilitating, though, I am facilitating and I'm not a participant. And the reason why is because it takes a huge amount of, and I'll be honest, it takes a huge amount of skills to make sure that these groups are run really productively. Because it might feel like you just get a bunch of people in a room, you just have a small chat about things. But a really good facilitator is going to be actually able to say, hey, are we talking about the right things? Are we going in a tangent? And do I need to bring the conversation back? Is this actually productive for the person who had the original ask? Are we, am I sensing something else with experience that no one else in the group is sensing? And that I'm thinking, it seems like there's, let's kind of like unfold this thing that I'm seeing, at least poke it a little bit, because from experience, usually when people behave this way, there's something bigger in the back of it. So it's both being able to guide the conversation as well as guide the culture of the group. To
Mhm.
be in a group where people, one of the hardest things of a mastermind is to have people open up on what's hardest for them, because that's kind of maximum vulnerability, right? If I was to tell you, like, David, right now, what's keeping you up at night, this is like deep in the onion. And so creating a group where people feel comfortable to go there does require creating a culture where we need to kind of model strength and vulnerability and openness ourselves as facilitators. And then that gives kind of the permission to everyone else, again, back to that mirroring, that gives permission to everyone else to go there. And so I would say there's so much attention that goes there that I would say most of the group that I've seen that have been highest performing, in my opinion, have been when the facilitator facilitates, not when the facilitator is a participant. Do I have conversations on the side with people where I'm running my own type of mastermind? Absolutely. And I would say that's more, it's not official, like it's not an official mastermind that I'm in, but absolutely I did bring kind of a few people that are closest to me and have these discussions because everyone has their blind spots. Everyone needs the extra clarity, and I'm definitely a fan of that. So yeah, it's healthy to eat our own dog food.
Like we said, I want to peel. I'm going to use your metaphor, the onion,
Yeah.
on vulnerability a little bit more. Why do you think
Mm.
vulnerability is such a superpower for leaders?
Ah. Well, so I'm borrowing so much from Brene Brown. I think I was quoting Brene Brown before she was cool, and before she was like a TEDx rock star, a TED Talk rock star. I so yes, I think there's something around vulnerability where people feel like it's a flaw. It's something negative to be vulnerable. And to quote her directly, what she says is vulnerability is our greatest measure of courage. I'm absolutely there. I think the hardest thing we can do is to be completely honest about where we're at and how we're feeling, not how we think we should feel or not how we think we should show up. That I think is really hard. The other part though about vulnerability is that it's kind of like, I would say, the Velcro of human connections. When we are able to share stories that have to do with vulnerability, to share why is it that we think a certain way, or why is it that we react to certain things, or when we know the why behind things that are relatively vulnerable, the type of stories that we usually don't share, you will see that people lean into one another like there's no tomorrow. They feel grateful to have been witnessing conversations like this. They feel grateful to have been let into that inner circle. And to me, this is an incredible way of creating trust, because some people were asking me, how is it that you're able to have like such deep conversations with groups that are just assigned to you? Or even worse, sometimes we're working at events and we just have one session to have people bond really closely together, right? And so how is it that you're able to do this? And I would say there's definitely a methodology, and this has to do around creating a space where you invite everyone to go in with vulnerability. But I think of it as a slow pool. And unfortunately, I don't remember who I heard this from, but a little bit as a slow pool, we ask everyone to take a leap of faith into sharing, but at the level that they're comfortable is in. Shallow end, deep end, it doesn't matter. People have different comfort level, but we all take that leap of faith together. Right. And so when you're able to create a space like this where people share, where people, yeah, will feel comfortable kind of, again, peeling up some of these layers of the onion and letting people in, it creates that Velcro and it also creates the permission to others to show up authentically. So it's always a thing of the first person that's going to go is going to set the mood a little bit, right? So best practices for us a lot of the time is to have the facilitator going first and share what deep looks like and then invite everyone else to follow. And when you create an experience like this, vulnerability is incredible. So a lot of the time our masterminds, our ongoing sessions will be one deeper session where we go deep with all the participants. That sets the tone. And we say, hey, you know how deep we're able to go and how everyone was like, whoa, what just happened here? The reason why we do this is so that you can talk about what's really going on in your business or in your life. We also work not just with entrepreneurs, but also leaders. Talk about what's really going on for you at work in your life. Um, and, bring that trust into sharing with us what you want solved and having conversations at this level, not at this, typical level, so that we can find real solutions that can have an impact on your life, right? Together
Mhm.
as a group. And so this is why I think vulnerability is so important, because otherwise we'll talk about fluff all day, right? And this is why networking feels so, so productive and so, so memorable because no one went there.
That's valuable. I'm curious as a facilitator,
Yeah.
how do you navigate too deep, right? You talked about the shallow, mid, and deep. Like if someone's on the very deep end sharing, how do you navigate and steer it back to being more productive versus more of almost like
Mm.
too much of a therapy session?
Yeah. Well, so I would say maybe too deep is not the issue, but maybe too unfocused might be the issue. So too deep, as in, someone that's going really deep into really sharing how they feel about this, how, I'll give you an example, right? We had, and obviously I don't want to share any names, but in one of our sessions, we had someone whose teenage son had run away or, had disappeared. And so it was to say, like, obviously, he had a really hard time focusing on anything else but that. And when his time came to be on the hot seat, we had like a very honest conversation with him around, look, you know what? Like, absolutely, we want to help you on your business and what you're building. We also understand that mentally, likely none of your business matters for you right now because you have this thing in your life that is beyond important for you to solve. And let's just show up there for you because this is what's most helpful for you. Right. So I think being able to be flexible and human is incredibly important, but also to say, is it helpful for you to come to these sessions? Is it helpful just for you to be in a different environment? We also will not necessarily talk about personal things that are going on an ongoing basis because that's not the goal of these sessions. But if absolutely there's an exception that happens and someone just needs the support and needs people to be there for them, we will go there. This happens very rarely, I would say. Usually what happens is that people might go really deep into, yes, into kind of like the emotion of like how heavy something feels, usually something professional, how heavy something feels. And we will acknowledge these, but then afterwards, and this is where the facilitator kind of comes in to be able to structure, to make sure that in order that we can maximize the value to support this person, let's make sure that we're there with support that is actionable, right? So making sure that the agenda kind of still moves on, that we really captured kind of the full depth of that challenge that's going on with this person. But right now that we have this, let's move on to support from the group. And being able to kind of compartmentalize things and to just have, I would say, the million little sentences. And it's not just sentences, it's like genuine empathy to understand how it feels for the person, but also understanding that helping is helping that person move to the next phase. and having the group's power to be there for them. I think this is where the key is between, yeah, what you were calling too deep, which might be kind of too personal or too emotional, and moving that towards more actionable, right? Which is where it needs to live. So
Okay. Yeah, that's powerful as far as like recognizing, okay, the human side of things, the personal side of things, and then inquiring, being curious, like, are you in the season or do you have the capacity to continue on and just acknowledging it while not romancing it too much and
yes.
staying there. So that's interesting. So if someone is listening who's stuck in isolation and overwhelmed, what's the first step that you would encourage them to start taking today
Mm.
as
I
a
would say, yeah, well, I would say one of the first things, first of all, before you there's likely a lot more support in entrepreneurship than you know. And I'm just saying this because I've worked with a number of different organizations that are all running entrepreneurial programs. And a lot of the time they struggle to just put the word out there because founders are kind of like, especially early stage founders, even later stage, a lot of founders are just flying under the radar, deep into the operational stuff. They're not necessarily putting themselves out there and they're hard to find. So I would say, first, just pull your head out of the water a little bit and see, are there different entrepreneurial programs that are out there? Now, related to masterminds, I would say there is nothing that's stopping you from starting your own mastermind. So, yes, there's sophisticated masterminds that you can join and be part of, but if you just get together 4 to 6 people, fellow entrepreneurs with you, I would say ideally similar business stage, and just look up online a very simple mastermind agenda. I'm happy, by the way, contact me. I'll give you more details on what this should look like. A very simple mastermind agenda. The goal of it is to say, find people that are at a similar business stage as you, no competitors in the room, and have on your calendar, I would say maybe every 2 weeks, a 2 hour slot where all of you come together to talk about what's going on in your businesses. The typical mastermind agenda that we have is relatively simple. Everyone gives an update for 2 minutes of how have they been since the last meeting. And then one person gets the hot seat. The hot seat is the bulk of the support from the group. So if that was you today, what is it that's keeping you up at night? What is it that's like most difficult and pressing that we can help you on? And from there, be able to just have the group support to help. There are kind of incredible ways in which to do this. There are also very simple ways. I would say if you're just feeling lonely and like are looking for like a next quick actionable step, I would say this is it. This is how I started my mastermind. It was not very sophisticated. With time, I kind of obviously now we train our facilitators and we have all these different things, and we are more on the B2B side. So this is where we spend our time, but still, I would say just knowing that you have meetings to look forward to, getting into the conversations of geeking about your startup and where things are at and what's hard and getting ideas from the rest of the group is going to be so powerful. One piece of advice I would give is around, so when someone is on the hot seat, the way in which the group supports is not just by shouting out advice, right? It's not to say like, David, you want to increase, I don't know, your social media presence? This is what you need to do, right? This is not it. Um, the best way to do it usually is a two-step process. The first, just having the group really understand what the challenge is. So ask questions, get the big picture, ask 5 whys as to what's really going on. Because a lot of the time, back to kind of this onion and the onion layers, um, between what someone says and what the actual problem is, there might be a few layers of differences. And it takes a little bit of the group's questioning to understand what is the real problem. And back to clarity, if you are not clear on what the problem is, you are wasting your time because you're solving for the wrong thing, right? So that is massively important. The group will help with that. The second part is that once everyone is clear on what the actual problem is, instead of solving with advice, which is our human nature to just want to jump to advice and just hold it back. I know, me too. Hold it back. Instead, try this. Try thinking of what's the story from your past that makes you want to give that advice. Likely, this is tied to a story, something you've experienced, maybe something you've read. Go find what that is and share that. This is how we'd never have conflicts in our group. This is how our groups feel super supportive and keep on getting deeper and deeper relationally in terms of connection amongst people, because the way in which we support is with stories. So I would encourage that for anyone that's starting in that wants to start a new group. It takes a little bit of practice, but it's also just one of the most efficient ways of communicating with people at large, not just in a mastermind group. Try giving feedback that way. It's going to be amazing. Yeah. So my 2 cents, but yes, hopefully someone's able to put this into action, and amazing people are everywhere. Just go find them and they will be so grateful that someone is taking the initiative to be starting a mastermind.
Mm, that piece of gold nugget state is staying with me. You said, resist the urge to want to give advice, and I'm paraphrasing, and share the story of why you want to share it versus the advice. And then you also said, asking questions actually leads us to solving what truly matters versus trying to solve things that we don't know what we're really trying to solve. So the five whys, and then sharing the story of that advice. That stuck with me. If if there's anything that if listeners are listening today, and there's one piece of advice that you want to encourage, like what would be that one thing that you would want them to take away from today's conversation?
I would say you are not alone. I I'm talking from and it's so simple, but at the same time, it's taken me years to really understand the value of that. I've ran hundreds of mastermind sessions. I've, sat into groups where there were tears, there was joy, there was, we've had like so many babies that were born, while people were part of our sessions, businesses that also went bankrupt, businesses that merged, like got acquired. We had so many different things that have happened. But I would just say one thing that we often forget is that we are like more than the differences, we are similar, right? We are like 95% similar. We have similar bodies. We function similarly. We, have hair, have nose, have all of these things we tend to forget, and we tend to focus on our differences so often. And I would say, don't go there, because the feelings that you are feeling right now are completely legit. Someone else is feeling them. Someone else has been in a similar situation and can understand you. And to me, this is the beauty of, again, kind of shedding the armor, like leaving the Superman suit at the door. When we allow ourselves to have these conversations, this is when we realize it. But otherwise, we keep on shining that, 5% of differences with our titles and how we dress and, how eloquent we are and all of these things. And I'm like, this is not what brings community together. And this is not what makes us feel better. We have an epidemic of loneliness. People, I think, are seeing differences more than ever. But I would say, like, shed that myth. Like, we are so similar, and I think it's such a chance that we have to all be here at the same time on Earth in this, like, micro moment of our universe. Let's just realize that, and let's just enjoy being together and help each other out. So, that's what I would say.
That's powerful. And now, if our listeners want to get connected with you, where and how can they get connected with you?
Yes, please connect. I love talking to people. Obviously, that's the job that I do, but I'm a genuine believer that like everyone has such a beautiful story, and I'm always eager to hear it. So yes, please connect with me on LinkedIn, Aiko Thurlow. I will be more than happy. Tell me that you saw me on David's podcast, and I will just be really thrilled to hear what's your story, where you're at. Yeah, and I'm excited to be meeting you. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Aiko. Thank you so much for your wisdom in sharing that leadership is not just a solo sport, but is a team sport. And for those listening, Aiko on LinkedIn, check her out, her mastermind and founders. And this might just be the clarity in the community you've been missing. And remember, clarity doesn't just come from within. It grows from community and being around the right people. Until next time, live by design and not default.
Thank you.